Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. What could it be? Riddles have captivated human thought for millennia, serving as both entertainment and a means of intellectual challenge. But what makes a riddle compelling? Why do some riddles feel deeply meaningful, while others seem trivial or arbitrary? The key lies in their underlying structure. At its core, a good riddle explains the dynamic relationship of three interrelated elements. These elements are not random, rather, they form a logical, functional, or symbolic triad, where each part depends on the others to create meaning. By analyzing these triadic relationships, we can systematically interpret riddles, revealing not just their surface solutions, but the deeper cognitive, linguistic, and cultural structures that give them depth. The triadic structure is fundamental to how we perceive and categorize the world. In riddles, triads provide a stable yet flexible framework that allows for multiple layers of interpretation. Some riddles rely on causal relationships, where one element leads to another in a structured progression. Others create reinforcement loops, in which the elements support and define each other, making the riddle feel intuitive yet surprising. Some riddles operate through symbolic interdependence, where the meaning of each element emerges only in relation to the others. These patterns give riddles their structure, guiding the mind toward resolution in a way that feels both logical and meaningful. By recognizing these triads, we move beyond merely solving riddles and begin to understand why they work, how they engage the mind, and what deeper truths they reveal. A well-formed riddle does not merely present a puzzle, it constructs a system in which every part plays a necessary role in guiding the thinker toward insight. Today we'll explore a selection of riddles from different historical periods. By mapping their underlying structures, we will demonstrate how this approach brings clarity and depth to riddle interpretation. This method transforms riddles from simple word puzzles into windows into thought, language, and culture, revealing the hidden structures that bring them to life. Ancient riddles offer us some of the earliest examples of structured thought, serving as more than mere puzzles. They encode cultural values, fundamental truths, and observations about the world, using metaphor and abstraction to communicate meaning. These riddles often explore themes of transformation, development, and causality, core aspects of human cognition. By examining their triadic structures, we gain a deeper understanding of how they function, not just as challenges to be solved, but as frameworks of interrelated meaning. There is a house. One enters it blind and comes out seeing. What is it? The answer to this riddle is a school. At first glance, it is a simple metaphor. A student enters uneducated and leaves enlightened. However, the deeper structure of the riddle reveals a triadic relationship between the building, the school itself, the attendee, the student, and education, the transformative process that takes place. These three elements form a causal triad, where the building provides the space, the attendee engages with the learning process, and education emerges as the result. Importantly, the transformation described does not come directly from the building itself. A school without students or teachers is just an empty space. Instead, the building serves as an enabler, a necessary but incomplete element that only gains significance when occupied by the attendee. Similarly, education does not exist in isolation. It requires both a learner and an environment in which learning can take place. The triad is what gives the riddle its strength, as each part depends on the others to create meaning. On a symbolic level, this riddle reflects the ancient view of knowledge as illumination. The metaphor of blindness turning into sight is still widely used today, reinforcing the idea that ignorance is a form of darkness, and learning brings clarity. The Sumerians, one of the first known civilizations to develop writing and formal education, understood that intellectual growth was a process, one that required both the right setting and the active participation of the learner. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? This famous riddle, posed by the mythical Sphinx to travelers in Greek legend, describes the stages of human life. A baby crawls on all 4s in the morning of life, an adult walks on 2 legs at noon, and an elderly person in the evening relies on a cane as a 3rd leg for support. Unlike a straightforward progression, this riddle follows a non-linear pattern, as the final stage mirrors the first. Both infancy and old age involve dependency, while adulthood represents a temporary phase of independence. The strength of this riddle lies in its triadic structure, which divides human life into three interdependent phases: childhood, adulthood, and old age. These are not just sequential steps, they define one another. The independence of adulthood has meaning only when contrasted with the reliance of early and late life. The child's crawling foreshadows the elder's cane, and the elder's return to dependence reflects the cyclical nature of human existence. The riddle does not simply describe growth. It highlights the inevitability of decline and the interconnectedness of all life stages. Beyond its individual logic, the riddle carries a profound cultural message. In ancient Greek thought, the passage of time was often viewed as both progressive and cyclical. While individuals age and change, humanity as a whole remains constant in its trajectory. This is why the answer to the riddle is not just a person, but the concept of human life itself, not as a singular event, but as an evolving pattern of dependence and independence. Both of these riddles illustrate how meaning is constructed through interdependent triads. The Sumerian riddle presents a causal transformation, where education emerges from the relationship between space and student. The riddle of the Sphinx, on the other hand, follows a non-linear cycle, in which the stages of life define one another in a continuous loop. These structures make the riddles more than just puzzles. They turn them into reflections on knowledge, growth, and the human condition. By examining riddles through their triadic relationships, we move beyond simply finding the right answer. We uncover the deeper logic that makes them work, the structural balance that gives them depth, coherence, and lasting significance. These riddles endure not just because they are clever, but because they reveal fundamental truths about how we experience the world. As civilizations grew more complex, so did their riddles. Classical and medieval societies used riddles not only for entertainment, but also as exercises in wit, wisdom, and religious or philosophical reflection. During this period, riddles often became more intricate, relying on metaphor, double meanings, and hidden truths. Many riddles from this era reflect the technologies, beliefs, and oral traditions of the cultures that produced them. They were passed down in manuscripts, myths, and spoken challenges, serving as tests of intelligence and insight. Two riddles from this period, the Exeter Book Riddle from Anglo-Saxon England and Odin's unanswered riddle from Norse mythology, illustrate how medieval riddles could range from practical descriptions of everyday objects to profound reflections on the limits of knowledge itself. A strange thing hangs by man's hip, hidden by a garment. It has a hole in its head. It is stiff and strong and holds firm when in use. What is it? The answer to this riddle is a key, though the description deliberately encourages misinterpretation by making it sound vaguely like something else, an example of the medieval love for double entendre. On a surface level, the riddle is a playful exercise in concealment and revelation. However, when examined through its underlying structure, we see that it relies on a reinforcement triad: the metal from which the key is made, the lock that defines its purpose, and the access it grants. The key by itself is an inert object. It only gains meaning through its relationship to the lock. Likewise, the lock serves no purpose without the key, and access is not an inherent property of either. It is the function that emerges when the two are brought together. This is a classic reinforcement triad, where each element strengthens the others, forming a system in which the key is not just an object, but a crucial enabler of security and control. This riddle reflects the medieval world's fascination with tools and craftsmanship, as well as the symbolic power of keys in religious and social contexts. Keys represented authority, secrecy, and the transition between spaces, whether literal, as in the unlocking of a door, or metaphorical, as in the unlocking of knowledge or divine mysteries. The riddle's structure reinforces this idea. Without the triadic interaction, the key has no power. It is in its use that it becomes significant. What did Odin whisper into the ear of his dead son Balder? Unlike many riddles that present a solvable challenge, this one offers no definitive answer. The response is simply a secret. But the brilliance of this riddle lies not in the hidden knowledge itself, but in the structure that makes it unknowable. It forms a bottlenecked triad where the whisper, speech, the listener, recipient, and the hidden truth, the content, are all interdependent. Yet because the listener, Balder, is dead, the chain of transmission is broken. The riddle creates an absolute bottleneck. The secret was spoken, but it can never be received, and therefore it remains forever unknown. This riddle plays on the Norse fascination with fate, mystery, and the limits of human knowledge. Odin, a god of wisdom, often deals in secrets that mortals can never fully grasp. Here, the structure of the riddle itself reflects its theme. Knowledge is not just about what is spoken, but about what can be understood and passed on. Since the cycle is broken, the answer is permanently withheld, making the riddle both a statement about knowledge and a paradox about its inaccessibility. The idea of a whisper as a vehicle for hidden truth also ties into the oral tradition of Norse mythology. Much of what was known or remembered depended on storytelling, and once a story or a secret was lost, it was truly gone. This riddle forces the listener to confront the fragility of knowledge, illustrating how meaning is constructed not only by the words themselves, but by the relationships between speaker, listener, and content. The riddles of this period reveal a shift in focus, from straightforward transformations, as seen in ancient riddles, to interplay and dependency between elements. The Exeter book riddle uses a reinforcement structure, where meaning emerges from functional interconnection. The Odin riddle, by contrast, highlights the vulnerability of knowledge, showing how a broken link in the triad renders the entire system meaningless. Both riddles reflect important aspects of their time. The Exeter book riddle speaks to the medieval world's focus on craftsmanship and the power of tools, while Odin's riddle embodies the Norse worldview, where wisdom is often hidden, fate is inescapable, and not all questions have answers. Through triadic analysis, we see that medieval riddles were more than playful word games. They were reflections of how people understood objects, knowledge, and their limitations. The relationships within these riddles mirror relationships in the real world, making them enduring puzzles that still provoke thought today. As Europe moved through the Renaissance and Enlightenment, riddles evolved alongside philosophy, science, and literature. This period saw a heightened focus on reason, perception, and human nature, reflecting broader intellectual shifts. Riddles were no longer just exercises in wordplay or tests of wit. They became ways to explore deeper truths about knowledge, identity, and logic. During this time, literature and drama incorporated riddles not only as clever puzzles, but as metaphors for insight and self-discovery. Shakespeare, for example, wove riddles into his plays to illuminate themes of fate, justice, and human folly. Meanwhile, Enlightenment thinkers explored logic and deduction, leading to riddles that tested reasoning itself. Two riddles from this period, the Shakespearean riddle from King Lear and the logical family puzzle of the 19th century, illustrate how riddles were used to challenge perception and unravel hidden relationships. A man may see how this world goes with no eyes. This riddle, spoken by the blinded Earl of Gloucester in King Lear, forces the audience to consider what it truly means to see. The literal contradiction, a man without eyes who sees, invites the reader to look beyond physical sight to a deeper kind of perception. The answer to the riddle is insight, but what makes it powerful is its triadic structure: blindness, perception, and truth. At first, blindness seems like a limitation, a loss of knowledge, but paradoxically, it allows for a sharpening of perception, forcing Gloucester to see the world as it truly is: corrupt, unjust, and deceptive. This perception, in turn, leads to truth, an understanding that was unavailable to him when he relied solely on his physical sight. The triad is harmonic, as each element deepens and reinforces the others. Blindness removes distraction, perception takes its place, and truth is the ultimate realization. Shakespeare frequently explored the idea that those who are physically blind may see more clearly than those with working eyes. This theme appears not only in King Lear, but also in other works where fools, madmen, or outcasts become the bearers of truth. The riddle encapsulates the idea that knowledge is not merely about what one sees, but about what one understands. Brothers and sisters have I none, but that man's father is my father's son. This classic logic riddle plays with generational relationships and self-reference, a theme that became increasingly important as logic puzzles gained popularity in the Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment periods. The answer is son, but solving it requires careful tracing of familial relationships. The triadic structure at play here is father, speaker, and generational lineage, a framework that defines familial identity through relational logic. The trick in the riddle is in the phrase, my father's son. Since the speaker has no siblings, my father's son must refer to the speaker himself. Thus, that man's father must be the speaker, making that man his son. The riddle is not merely about identifying a relationship. It forces the listener to reconstruct meaning based on an implicit structure. This is an example of an inclusive triad, where meaning is formed through the connection of all three elements. The father serves as the anchor, linking the speaker to the next generation. The son's identity only makes sense in relation to the speaker, and the speaker's identity is affirmed through his role as both son and father. The riddle cleverly disguises this structure, making the answer feel elusive until the underlying triadic relationship is uncovered. Riddles of this period reveal an increasing fascination with perception and reasoning. The Shakespearean riddle explores the interplay between blindness and insight, showing how loss can lead to deeper understanding. The logical family riddle, by contrast, is an exercise in deductive reasoning, revealing how meaning emerges from relationships rather than isolated facts. Both riddles demonstrate how Enlightenment thought influenced riddle construction. Shakespeare's riddle reflects the era's growing philosophical complexity, while the family puzzle showcases the rise of formal logic and structured reasoning. In both cases, the riddle's depth comes from its triadic relationships, which create meaning not through simple question and answer structures, but through layers of interdependent insight. By analyzing riddles through their triads, we see how they were not merely games of wit, but tools for exploring knowledge itself. In an era where reason and perception were constantly being re-examined, riddles served as microcosms of the very questions that defined the Renaissance and Enlightenment. What is truth? What is identity? And how do we truly see the world? As the modern era brought advances in logic, literature, and abstraction, riddles evolved in new directions. No longer bound by strict linguistic or logical constraints, riddles began to play with meaning itself, sometimes embracing absurdity, sometimes pushing the limits of deductive reasoning. In this period, we see riddles that challenge the structure of language, the nature of logic, and the boundaries of interpretation. Two riddles from this time period, Lewis Carroll's whimsical question from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and the logical puzzle attributed to Einstein, illustrate how modern riddles explore different cognitive processes. One revels in wordplay and ambiguity, while the other relies on strict logical deduction. Together, they demonstrate how riddles in the modern era have expanded from puzzles of knowledge into puzzles of thought itself. Why is a raven like a writing desk? Unlike traditional riddles, this question, posed by the Mad Hatter in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, was originally meant to have no answer. Carroll's goal was not to lead the listener to a logical resolution, but to destabilize meaning, mirroring the nonsensical world of Wonderland. However, because the question follows the familiar structure of a riddle, readers instinctively tried to solve it, drawing connections between ravens, desks, and writing. Over time, playful answers emerged, most famously, because Poe wrote on both. At its core, this riddle relies on a combination triad: raven, desk, and writing. These elements have no necessary causal link. Rather, they share an associative connection based on language, metaphor, and cultural reference. A raven does not directly relate to a writing desk, but both can be tied to writing. A raven can represent poetry, ink, or quills, while a desk is where writing occurs. The relationship is conceptual rather than logical, fitting the pattern of combination, where meaning is created through an arbitrary yet resonant linkage. This riddle marks a departure from traditional forms by embracing ambiguity. It is not about discovering a hidden truth, but about engaging in the process of connection-making itself. It reflects the 19th century fascination with linguistic play, absurdity, and the ways in which meaning can emerge from unexpected associations. 5 houses of different colors, with owners of different nationalities, drinking different beverages, and owning different pets. Who owns the fish? Unlike Carroll's playful riddle, Einstein's puzzle is a rigid exercise in deductive logic. The riddle provides a series of conditions about 5 houses and their inhabitants, requiring the solver to eliminate possibilities through a process of logical inference. The answer, determining who owns the fish, is not immediately apparent. Rather, it emerges from the careful application of rules. The triadic structure of this riddle consists of rules, process, and conclusion. The rules define the problem space, providing the framework within which reasoning must occur. The process of elimination and logical deduction is the mechanism by which the solver works through the possibilities. The conclusion is the singular inevitable answer that remains once all other possibilities have been ruled out. This follows a convergent triad, where multiple inputs narrow toward a single necessary outcome. Unlike earlier riddles that hinge on metaphor or linguistic trickery, this puzzle represents the rise of formal logic and structured problem-solving, a key feature of the modern intellectual landscape. It embodies the principles of mathematical reasoning and algorithmic thinking, making it more akin to a logic puzzle than a traditional riddle. The appeal lies not in the answer itself, the fish owner, but in the intellectual challenge of deriving it through structured reasoning. Modern riddles reflect two competing intellectual movements: the embrace of uncertainty and the pursuit of absolute logic. Carroll's riddle destabilizes meaning, forcing the listener to invent connections where none are explicitly given. Einstein's riddle, by contrast, imposes a structured framework, demonstrating that with the right reasoning, a single correct answer can always be found. Both riddles, however, share a common theme: they challenge the solver's way of thinking. The first does so by forcing associative leaps, while the second does so by demanding strict logical discipline. In doing so, they reflect the broader intellectual shifts of the modern era, one that simultaneously celebrates abstract creativity and rigorous logic, recognizing that meaning can be both constructed and discovered. By analyzing modern riddles through their triadic structures, we see how they extend beyond simple puzzles into reflections of how we connect ideas, interpret language, and structure thought itself. Riddles are more than word games. They are structured reflections of how we think, how we perceive relationships, and how we search for meaning. By analyzing their triadic structures, we uncover the deeper logic that makes riddles compelling, not just as puzzles to be solved, but as microcosms of cognition, culture, and reasoning. Across history, the evolution of riddles mirrors the evolution of human thought. Ancient riddles were often about transformation, how one state leads to another, whether through education, aging, or fate. Medieval riddles introduced complexity by reinforcing relationships or highlighting missing knowledge, often reflecting a world shaped by hierarchy and mystery. Renaissance and Enlightenment riddles moved toward perception and logic, questioning how we know what we know and forcing us to untangle meaning from structure. Modern riddles took these developments to new extremes, some embracing structured deduction, others dissolving meaning entirely into playful abstraction. At each stage, the triadic approach reveals how riddles function on multiple levels. Their answers are not isolated facts, they emerge from interdependent relationships. This explains why strong riddles endure. They do not rely solely on a clever trick, but on a deeply interconnected structure that resonates across different layers of understanding. A good riddle does not merely hide an answer, it constructs a system where meaning is revealed through the interaction of its elements. Beyond riddles, this method of interpretation has wider implications. It suggests that meaning itself is triadic rather than binary, not just this or that, but an interplay of forces where the connections matter as much as the components. This insight extends beyond puzzles into how we analyze literature, philosophy, and even real-world systems, where causality, reinforcement, and emergence shape the structures of knowledge. By studying riddles through their triads, we do more than decipher clever questions. We engage in a deeper form of pattern recognition, one that sharpens our ability to see hidden structures, whether in language, logic, or life itself. One last thing though, we began with a riddle, one that came without an answer. In Judges 14 verse 14, "Out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet." It's been a few thousand years, so let's see if we are ready to understand. The mouth that feeds, the mouth that speaks. Both shape the world through voice or feast. One gives the body what it seeks, the other grants the soul its peace. The strong may rule with hand or tongue, yet wisdom's rule is far more sweet. Its echoed words on hearts are hung, a richer honey more complete. So out of might comes guidance true, a law, a lesson, wisdom's way. The spoken word, the sword we hew, to carve the dark and light the day. Thus, Samson's riddle still imparts a deeper truth for all who seek. True strength is found in minds and hearts, and power flows through words we speak.